Welcome back. And when we last left off, we were halfway through laying up the lower half of the fuselage. So here you can see this is Thursday. The core had been all cleaned up and buttered around the edges and sanded and just sort of smooth with a 45 degree sort of bevel on there, just so when the carbon fiber cloth goes down, it sits nicely across all those transitions from where there's core to where there's no core. And so here we are, we're laying up first some extra pieces that add sort of extra strength in places that required it from the FEA analysis. So there's a section there across where the doors are to add some extra strength, and then there's one there we're laying up right now across the forward bulkhead, and then this one here at the back where the aft bulkhead sits. So just adding an extra ply of carbon there, just to add some extra strength there, and then we finish off with one layer of light carbon, and then one layer of the heavyweight carbon. So here comes the first layer of the light carbon there. And this time we decided not to use the impregnator, just to try it out and see the difference. The downside of the impregnator was there was a lot of cleanup afterwards. Did a great job of wetting down the fabric the right amount, but we ended up having to clean the machine, and we think it's probably better using that machine when we have like a lot of work to do on a lot of parts at once. So anyway, this worked out pretty good, just wetting it down with the rollers, and we were able to get good consistency with the resin distribution just using the rollers there. And of course, when it goes under vacuum, any excess resin is drawn up through the breather fabric, the breather. I guess it's kind of like a plastic with perforated holes in it, and it gets sucked into the actual white breather fabric, so you don't end up with excess resin actually sitting in the part itself. So there we go. We've pretty much got the first layer of the lightweight carbon put down there, and again, just rolling it into place there and smoothing it all out. And it's really important when you're laying this out that you get the material to be laid out dimensionally correct. In other words, you don't want to be stretching it in one direction or another, because it's quite pliable and you can easily make it wider than it normally would come off the roll, or you could make it longer just by pulling it. And likewise, you can sort of stretch it diagonally. So the idea is to try and get it lined up so the X and Y dimensions of a piece of fabric are the same once they're laid out as they are when they come off the roll. So that's kind of the tricky part of this process, and that ensures the best strength for the part that you're creating. So this was about two. Actually, I think it took about 2.5 to 3 hours tops just to do this whole thing. So it actually wasn't that much, and in total, creating the whole part was less than 8 hours of work for pretty much 3 or 4 of us on at any given one time. So we're pretty happy with how long it takes, but we're going to try and see if we can speed up the process of getting the core in there. The step of having to bevel the edges and then fill that with some resin and micro was a little bit time consuming, and there's other ways that we can do that and bevel those edges. So we'll be thinking about those options going forward for creating the parts for customer aircraft, or at least the lower fuselage for customer aircraft. So here you can see it's the last layer of the heavy carbon going on there, and working that all in. So the heavy is basically just a thicker weave, and the light is about 1/3 of the thickness. So there's the peel ply being laid in there, again to allow the resin to sort of be drawn up, excess resin to be drawn up away from the carbon fiber. And we just lay that in. It doesn't have to be sort of wet down or anything like that. When the vacuum goes on, it'll push it in nicely. And there's the plastic breather fabric, the perforated breather fabric. And so that goes on to allow resin to come through that. And then there's the actual sort of fluffy white cloth there that absorbs any of the excess resin. So we just lay that in there. And there's the vacuum bag that we put down, and we expose the other side of the sticky, double-sided sticky tape there, and just seal it all around the edges, and hook up our two little frogs there, and see we bring the vacuum pump in here in a second, and get that all hooked up to the vacuum, and then we're all good to go. So there's the first one being hooked up and under vacuum just like that. So that's that one laid up now. And here it is at normal speed. So you can see there the excess resin being drawn up through into that white breather fabric, or the white fluffy fabric. So when you see that sort of patchiness that you're seeing there, that's what you want to see, sort of a distribution of patches like that. If you see too much of it, it means you put down too much resin. If you don't see enough, it means you didn't put down enough resin. So we actually were right on the money with how wet down we got the carbon. So there's the vacuum gauge there, pulling about 24.5 inches of vacuum on there, and it sort of comes on and off with a pressure switch. So the next thing up was creating the braces for the keel mold. So that foam that we cut a couple of days ago, basically just put 2 layers of carbon fiber on that just to bond it into place. So now we can sort of turn that over and be able to lay up the part without it sort of wanting to tip over. And there it is, again, back off of its plug, and just needs to be trimmed around the edges. So Mark was doing that in the afternoon, get that cleaned up, and so we'll be ready to lay that part. So here we are, here's the fuselage with the bag all off, and that's basically the finished product there. And you can see it actually came out really well. See all the places where the core ends, and there's the door cutouts there, and there's the indentation there for where the forward bulkhead is, and then the nose door there. And then the bit at the end there, we just leave that because we don't need any extra rigidity in the very tip of the nose there. So pretty happy with how that came out. No problems at all. And next thing we'll be releasing that. So here you can see Jeff going around with this wedge we have. We have a couple of these where you can actually hook an air nozzle to them, and they have a little hole in the end. So it shoots air in underneath the part, between the part and the mold, to help release it. So you just go all the way around, and then we put a bunch of wedges in there, and generally sometimes we have to get out there with a rubber mallet just to tap around there to make sure everything gets released. Sometimes there's little places that want to stick, but it didn't take more than about sort of 10 or 15 minutes to get this one released. And we actually, 3 of us got a nice big static electricity shock out of that thing because of the air shooting in there created huge static buildup. It was like 110 volts. Anyway, that's what it looks like sitting flipped over, and I got the guys to sort of stand there so you can get a feel of how large it is. And here's more of a close-up view. So you can see the white sort of gel coat that Jeff put on there, obviously transferred onto the mold, onto the part. And obviously this will get sanded and painted once the whole aircraft's together, so it doesn't have to be a perfectly shiny surface. And in fact, you don't want it to be because you want to have your paint to be able to stick. So it's basically got the finish that we left on the mold. Next up, those floor brace molds that I was sanding on the other day just to finish off or fix up these little bubbles that were in the edges there had been done. So Jeff decided to lay those up yesterday afternoon, and it didn't take him too long to get those done. And here you can see they're under the vacuum bag. So those will be ready to pop out on Monday. So we're starting to get quite a few parts now that are done, that are going to make up the fuselage. So here's the aft bulkhead, and actually I didn't get any video, not even any pictures of us finishing that off with the extra 4 layers of heavy fabric. And we also ended up creating the braces the same day at the same time. So that's actually sitting on its braces right now and released from its plug. And the mold came out really well. Super happy with the quality of that. But the big question on this one was, how was this new silicon rubber profile going to release compared to the amount of time we were spending on cleaning out the wax profile that we're using. So here Jeff's just getting where the end of it is, just dragging that out. And we're all sitting there wondering, is this going to come out easy? And sure enough, it does. So we're all super happy because we were spending about 8 man hours cleaning out a part about this size, cleaning the wax profile out, just because it just made a big mess, and we were having to melt it out and all sorts of stupid stuff. Anyway, so super happy about how that came out. And so the next thing was I needed to start cutting the core for the part for that. So this is one of the sides for that part, and that indentation there was for where the landing gear bolt is going to be. So I've got the left side cut and the middle cut and the right side cut, but there'll be more on that next week, and you'll see us laying up that part and a bunch of other things to come as well. So that's our update for this week. Thanks for watching.